Have you know that my interviewees have stolen my best punchline, because I was going to tell how music can affect a person, that it can actually lift the spirits or it can cast a sombering spell. But hearing the background music of Mel Stander and his Gentlemen of Swing, you know that this is a toe-tapping rhythmic group that really sends the fingers snapping and the body bouncing. We're delighted to have you back, Mel, and
nice
you and the Gentlemen of Swing. Tell us what's happened to the band since we last talked. What's new?
Same old thing. We've been doing a lot of practicing, and we've...
Hey, guys, did you hear that? Same old thing? I'm asking what's new.
But you know, we find that as we practice, we improve. But we have played some engagements at the Burning Tree Golf and Country Club, and at the Whittier Towers.
I think you're getting ahead of me, Mel. I want to find out what's new at the band, and I see that there's a new pianist.
I'd like to introduce you then to some of our new men, all of our new men. Jim Crash at the piano.
Hello, Jim.
Don Ronaldo at the guitar.
Hi, Don.
Tom Naso at drums.
You know, Tom, when the band was here before, when we were doing it at the studio, the drummer, I think, was 16. He was filling in for the summer, and I do believe you look a little more mature.
18.
18. Show him.
And back here we have a couple of new trombonists, Bud Bufore and Milton Murray.
Now, who's Bud?
Bud is...
Oh, welcome, Bud, and...
Milt Murray.
Milt, okay.
And a new saxophonist, Bob Dondero.
Oh, gosh. You know, I keep forgetting that I have this traveling mic.
Okay,
Would you
fine.
introduce the trombonist again?
Yes.
They're okay.
All right, fine.
That's right, the saxophonist.
Okay, Bob Dondero in the end, and Jim Lloyd.
Good. Gosh, you've really augmented your group. You know, when you mentioned before that you've been practicing a lot and you've got like a tight nucleus here, is that just, do you acquire that just by performing together?
That helps. We continue. We continually practice, and practice makes perfect.
Well, you know, I think it's interesting as you're playing, and I see your bass is a symphony member of the Grosse Pointe Symphony. Now, as you're playing, though, can you listen to each other, and can you suddenly feel as though the sound is really coming around to what you wanted?
Well, we try to. It's a little bit difficult listening within a section, but we try to do our best.
You know, you mentioned that some of the places that you've been playing, the Whittier. Since I perform, I have been at the Whittier, and I sometimes think, how can a band perform without involving the community there? Do they get up and dance, or?
Oh, yes. I think that the people that were there the last time we played had a lot of fun. They danced. There's a good ballroom there. And many of them didn't want to dance. They just wanted to listen. So we had the listeners and the dancers.
Well, that sounds like a good group. You also mentioned the Burning Tree Country Club.
Yes.
What's your scene there?
Well, that's a very beautiful country club, and they enjoy the big band sound, and we've been there 4 times now because they called us back each time.
That's not bad. That shows a sign of success, doesn't it? The other place, I heard that you have an up-and-coming engagement, and when I think of the Grosse Pointe Symphony, I understand that you're going to play for a gala.
Yes, we're playing October 7th at the Country Club of Detroit for the Grosse Pointe Symphony Society dinner dance of the year.
Well, that shows that you've really come of age, I guess. I guess that's what one would say here. With all of the performances that you have, and I just think including the time that you're taking today, when do you practice, and how often do you practice?
Well, we practice weekly, and we practice from 10 to 12 in the morning. And the boys are very, very conscientious, and they're there every week.
How is the music selected? You as the director, do you kind of get the things together and get it set up for the guys?
I think that everyone contributes their suggestions and so on, and that's how we decide.
I just wonder, Mel, if you and the Gentlemen of Swing could do a couple of selections for us, like your favorites. What would that be?
Well, the first one is going to be A Blue World, and we're featuring Andy Blaine on the flugelhorn, Andy? On the trumpet, I'm sorry. And followed by Jazz Me Blues.
Oh, thank you. Boy, that's terrific. I wish that we could have introduced the second gentleman, too, next to Andy. What's John, of course. What a sound. Andy, those pipes are doing okay. I mean, blowing into the trumpet. Right. And now we're going to hear Jazz Me Blues. Mel, that was really hot. That was played so well.
Thank you.
You know, this is kind of away from the topic of this wonderful piece, but in a recent news article, I read that the lifespan of musicians is far greater than the general population. I just wondered if you had any view on that.
Well, I think that music helps. I think that music is the best therapy for anyone, and it helps in longevity. But you know, among the 14 musicians here, the average age, should I tell you?
Are you men ready to reveal that intimate detail of your life?
The average age is 69.97852.
I want to know who that 69.582. That's remarkable. I wonder if in a scientific way, if, well, music is enhancing anyhow. It lifts your thought and frees your soul. But I wonder, as I watch all the musicians perform, they all have to expand their lungs, except the pianists. That I just wonder if that has something to do with, like they always tell you, you're supposed to breathe deeply, and this is good for your cardiovascular and your lung capacity. Do you think that has something to do?
I'm sure it helps.
That's what I call accommodating.
When I was taking instruction on the saxophone, one of the exercises was to see how long I could hold my breath.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into a couple of minutes, you know, and that's quite a long time.
Well, okay, we'll put you all on a health kick, that it's because you're expanding your lung and heart and muscles and all this other stuff. The other thing, out of curiosity, that comes to mind is, how do music and marriage go together? Is it harmonious?
I have a bit more trivia for you. Among the
I don't know if I should be afraid of this or not.
Among the 14 musicians of the Gentlemen of Swing, what was your question?
Boy, that's attentive. It was, do marriage and music go together?
Yes, among the 14 musicians, we have all been married a cumulative total of 600 years. So
good grief. Music must do something for health.
yes, I'm sure it does.
Now, you were going to add that in addition to the 600 years of marriage, there were children involved?
Yes, of the 14 Gentlemen of Swing, they produced 35 children. And I think your next question is, did any of them follow in
Not
music?
yet. No,
Oh,
that's-
all right,
that's
fine.
coming
Then
on the
I'll-
next
then I'll wait.
page.
There were 35.
I don't know if, well, zero population wouldn't approve of that, but they think that you were restrained. So with that note, restrained, I wonder if we could have another, what's this?
You were talking about age, and there happens to be a birthday boy in the Gentlemen of Swing today, and it happens to be Ray Brennan. Am I correct, Ray?
Where's Ray?
I did.
Oh, there he is.
And a card signed by all of the Gentlemen of Swing.
Wow,
Happy
thank you.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, happy birthday from all of us. That's wonderful.
I'll play better.
A very happy birthday. Can we impose on you to play another couple of selections? And if so, what would you select?
Next, we're going to play a Gershwin medley, and that will be followed by When the Saints Go Marching In.
Wow.
Embrace me, my sweet embrace. Embrace
I wonder what, when the saints come marching in is going to sound like. It'll send us right out of this whole room. But we're willing to take the chance. You know, when I suddenly was aware that the whole band was singing, it was all I could do from stepping to the back row and joining right in. With such versatility, Mel, how can, do the men play different instruments as well as fill in the singing part?
There's a lot of versatility in the band.
How is it?
Well, it would take me a long time to go into all of the instruments that all of the fellows play. But, for example, our one trombonist, Bud Kapoor, plays the flugelhorn, the trumpet, the electric bass, the bass fiddle. So he's very, very versatile.
Good heavens, everybody better take note or he'll take over all of your positions. Is there another one?
Well, yes.
Oh, well, I know that Andy plays he's looking around. Did you see that? He's not going to give credit to everybody being versatile. He might be out of a job. I know that Andy also sings, and that raises the next question. If you have 35 children among the group, being this versatile in music, is that an inherited trait then?
Well, that's interesting because only of the 35 children, there are only 3 that went into music professionally.
Now, you must have an opinion on that, Mel. What would that be?
Well, in my own case, I didn't encourage my children. They had to come to me if they were interested. I think a child has to be interested if he wants to do something about it.
Well, that's true. You know, just about a year and a half ago when we first met and I heard the Gentlemen of Swing, we discussed the resurgence of the big band sound. And I am aware that in the interim years that this sound has not just diminished, but it seems to have a groundswell all its own, that it's appealing not only to at first we thought the younger people who had never been exposed to it, but it really has a vast audience. What is your thought on that? How do
Well,
you and
I think it's quite a trend now. For a long time, I think that it wasn't as popular as it is right now. But you will find bands similar to this over the country, many of them. And they're all really enjoying it, and people like to hear that sound.
You know, Mel, somebody was just saying that when this younger generation that are now 13 and 14 go out to Sun City, Arizona, they're not going to be sitting idly by. They'll be sitting in their rockers, snapping their fingers and making sounds, but not saying words. But maybe that'll change, right?
That's right.
How about cueing us in with a final number? What would your final number be?
How long do we have?
About 2 minutes.
All right, fine. Serenade in Blue.
Okay. With the Serenade in Blue fading us into the sunset, I want to thank all of the Gentlemen of Swing and Mel Stander for being with us today and sharing this wonderful talent. And welcome to all the new men and happy birthday. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing our discussion this week on mental illness. Dr. Thomas Sullivan, the acting director of Lafayette Clinic, last week spoke of what is being done with mental health programs, what progress we're making, the significance of funding. And this week, Dr. Sullivan has agreed to come back and join Carol Scripps, a parent. And I'd like you to watch this film clip before we get into the discussion.
The Institute of Pennsylvania Hospital has been home for 18-year-old Dawn Norris on and off for a long time. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia a few years ago. She is still troubled by what she calls deep thought, an obsessional thought process, a withdrawal from reality into fantasy that leaves her unable to distinguish which is which. Her doctors say she has an overall progress report of 2 or 3 steps forward and 1 step backward. 2 months ago, she got her high school diploma in a special school here, and at the hospital gift shop, she has recently earned her very first paycheck. Little things to most people, but one day at a time, it's big. This day, she went home to Wilmington, Delaware for the day. The entire family sat down to play the game of life, frivolously throwing around toy paper money. In their real life, real money matters became life and death issues in the treatment of Dawn's schizophrenia.
There is no question in my mind that the only reason she's alive today is there was just enough hospitalization coverage to get her the medication she needed.
Here is their story. Dawn was a very bright child, reading by age 3, playing the piano so well she began composing her own music by age 9. She was a straight A student in school, and she began competing successfully in national piano competition. Then odd behavior began.
When she first started acting in a bizarre way, we thought it was normal teenage belligerence, and we thought, oh, wow, we'll be glad when these years get past. This is rough. Oldest kid we didn't know.
Dawn was becoming anorexic, depressed, suicidal.
And really what we were dealing with was trying to deal with a person whose brain wasn't functioning properly due to an illness, but we didn't know that.
The piano fell silent, as Dawn did. 2.5 years deep into the problem, finally a doctor diagnosed it as schizophrenia.
I ranted and raved all the way back from Philadelphia. My poor husband here had to sit through 40 miles of hearing me put the doctor down, put all psychiatrists down, because we had dealt with 26 individuals who had given us incorrect diagnoses up to that point. So by now I was getting real freaky about any professional. To me, schizophrenia meant split personality, or perhaps Norman Bates creeping around. I didn't even know what it was, but I knew it sure was something my kid didn't have.
Job stress, marital stress, family stress mounted.
Our whole family was falling apart because of her illness. I was real upset, and my whole family was upset.
Well, if you want to talk about highs and lows, think back 5 years when she was a nationally acclaimed pianist, and would be just as proud of her any time she would go out to compete, and she always won some kind of an award or a medal. And contrast that with about 3 years later when we were in this very room and had to watch a policeman bind her hands and feet because she was suicidal, cart her off to an ambulance like a sack of grain and take her up for her first hospitalization.
It took all of the 180 days of hospitalization their insurance allowed, and more, to get Dawn under control. She had adverse reactions to the first 11 drugs tried. They had 180 days, but many policies allow only 60 or 30.
Most families, even their catastrophic health care coverage, is not the same for mental illness as it is for any other type of illness. If someone were to go and look at their own health care policy, they would be shocked.
His company insurance covered about $250,000 of her care costs. The family came up with about $50,000 out of pocket.
To do that, you use up all your short-term savings, you tap into your long-term savings, you sell off assets, you borrow, you do everything you can. You're talking about a child's life and a child's lifetime.
Now, the Norrises travel nationwide speaking about mental illness and trying to improve services. Dawn obviously lights up around her little brother. When all this started, and he was just 2, he was the only one she felt didn't hate her. She wrote a book for him to explain what was happening to her. The word parnate in the title refers to one of the drugs she once took. After taking it, she saw bugs all over her body. So the parnate bugs became a joke, a better way to deal with her problem.
Blue Parnate had a problem. Christmas was coming and he was very depressed. Everywhere he looked, he saw other Parnate bugs having fun. He was upset because he didn't feel happy or excited. Suddenly, there was a commercial on TV. The announcer on TV said, "Do you know anyone who is very depressed and seems confused?" The announcer then said, "He or she may have a mental illness."
The book ends happily, the last page concluding, "Since then, he has felt good most of the time. He has done many things and enjoys life."
Is that a true story?
It's getting there. In the book, it happens a little faster than it would in real life, but, it's a children's book, it has to. The way it is now is it's getting slowly better and better.
It's like if you had a very capable child and you saw that child get hit by a Mack truck, but then over and over and over again. It's a grieving that goes on over and over again, and when they are doing well and then have a setback, you get dashed and hurt all over again.
Well, I'm better, but what do I really have? I don't have my liking for life as much as normal people do. But I've had some times now where it is better. I feel like I'm having a good time, instead of feeling like, oh, I'm never going to get out of this.
5 years ago, I would have said I would rather she have leukemia than this illness. It's so terrible. Now, being better educated and knowing what I know today, I would rather she have schizophrenia because it is more easily treatable and because of the progress I see making.
I'd like to introduce our guests. You will remember Dr. Thomas Sullivan sitting next to me, and on the far side is Carol Scripps. Carol, you've experienced so much that was portrayed in the film clip we just watched. Could you tell us your experience with mental illness?
Well, I had never been connected with mental illness. I'd never known about it. I guess I had heard about it. When it first happened to me, or actually to my son, he was 28 years old, and he had been going to the Center for Creative Studies. He was interested in cartooning and becoming an artist, and possibly becoming an artist. He really hadn't decided exactly what he was going to do. I think Dr. Sullivan mentioned last week that sometimes this is, you can see in the early teens that this comes about. In looking back, hindsight is 20/20. In looking back, I think that, he was definitely having some problems in his junior and senior year in high school. And I sort of attributed this to the fact that he was maybe socializing, which was fantastic, because he had been a person who had basically one or two friends, and he'd been kind of shy and quiet. He'd been a baseball player, and he'd also been involved in basketball, and he was a good student. We'd gotten reports that, he was doing well, and the school board at that time sent out things that said, "Congratulations, Mike, we're really proud of the kind of work that you're doing." They may still do it to this day. I don't know. I'm not involved in that part. But I first got a call. I had been away, just as a P.S. I had been away for about a month, and so I hadn't been in touch with my son. And I had been going through a very difficult period myself. And but when I came back, I saw my son, and we had dinner together, and I thought he was saying things that didn't really make too much sense to me. I thought he was putting too much significance on just happenstance. He was talking about people on the bus putting their hand in their pocket, and that all had a relationship to him. And he was talking about a friend of his who was at the Detroit Science Center, who was a member of the CIA. I didn't feel it was necessary to check this out. I thought maybe he was. It didn't make any difference to me one way or the other. But the first time that I had gotten a call, he was at the University Hospital. What had happened was, and I backtracked to find out what the background was for that day. He had been on the campus of the Center for Creative Studies, And he was just trying to talk to some people, some students, and tell them that this was a very dangerous place to be. And that it was not the Center for Creative Studies, it was the Center for the CIA. A guard came up to him and thought he was high on drugs and said, "Would you please remove yourself?" And he hadn't been hurting anybody, he hadn't done anything that was, you know, physically harmful, but he was trying to warn them that there was a danger. And he came back, I think, because he was still concerned about the other students and the fact that they were going to be exposed to, you know, the CIA. And the guard, I'm sure, said, "Boy, I've sent this guy off once. What am I going to do now?" And he took him up to the Dean of Men. And fortunately, the Dean of Men was one of these very wise people who knew that he had a problem. I'm not certain that I would have known that he had a problem at that particular point, but he did. And Michael was trying to take apart his radio because he felt that it was bugged. And so when I got the call from the hospital, they said that he was going to be transferred to some other hospital, and I wasn't certain where. And I said, "Well, could you just hold on for a bit and let me get some information, background information?" And I was very lucky. I'd taught skating, and I had somebody who was in the skating club who was Dr. Douglas Sargent. And he was a psychiatrist, and I thought, gosh, where do I get information like this? And I called him, and he said, "Well, yes, I think your son definitely sounds like he needs help." And I had gotten some information from a teacher as well, and she said, "You have to be very careful about where your child goes, you know, to the hospital." That put a real scare in me, and I said, "Scare?" I mean, I was terrified, and so I wanted to get some good information, and he did give me some good information. Not only that, he went sort of the extra mile, and he made some calls, and he found that Cottage Hospital was filled, and he suggested that I take him to Harper Hospital. Well, I told them, and they said, "Well, that's highly irregular. We want to send him to DPI or MOMC or one of the places that was downtown. Also, Harper is downtown." I said, "Well, my son and I will come over and get him and take him to the hospital." And they said, "All right." And they had him there 4 days. He didn't have any medical insurance. He was 28 years old at the time. I didn't even think about the fact that he didn't have any hospital insurance. I knew that he'd been a student off and on, and he had sort of made his own way. He'd had various and sundry jobs, and I guess you feel that your children are always going to be healthy, although health insurance was a major concern of mine. And they dismissed him, and they said, "Your son is schizophrenic, and he is paranoid, has paranoia." And they said, and he's to go home. Well, he hadn't lived at home.
You know, one of the things, Carol, that I found out is that when a person is released from the hospital and they come home, it causes just terrible disruption within the family. Is this what happened?
Well, my family wasn't home at the time, and it did. And I just talked to my daughter the other day, and I said, "What were the kinds of feelings that you had?" And she said, "Oh, Mom," she said, "I used to dread coming home." And she said, "I actually think at times maybe this is going to happen to me." So there's a fear that this possibly could happen to, you know, my other son and to my daughter. But they were nifty guys. We had a very close family, and part of when he was released, he was to go see a psychiatrist, and in the process, he was going to a psychiatrist, and I felt that it was important to get some help for me and also for my children. So we went to some family therapy along with my son, and it was a good experience by and large. There were some things that were not good, and I think at that time that there was more of an emphasis on blaming the family and what were the causative things in the family. I think it can happen to families that have been great families, and I think it can happen to families where there's been abuse or whatever.
Let's turn to Dr. Sullivan. Why would parents or family circumstances be, to use the general term, blamed?
Well, when our field started, Johanna, about 100 years ago, we're relatively young. The first studies were on people over in Europe who had what were called neurotic illnesses. They were in touch with reality, and the background showed some problems in the family. After a while, we began to take that kind of theory and apply it to the major illnesses where you have a psychosis. And it was a theory that really didn't hold up, but it took maybe 50, 60, 70 years. We're still living with it. And we blame, you know, it must be the father, it must be the mother. But it's almost human nature to blame. It's a terrible kind of defense. You know, when anything ever happens in the house, the first thing you do is usually blame somebody. But to blame a family member has been very bad. And I think we're just coming out of that phase.
Oh, that must have been awfully difficult for you and your children.
Well, it was very difficult, but I didn't feel the blame personally because my family had been very important to me. My husband was an educator, and we had spent a great deal of time with our family. And it didn't make much sense to me that it was, you know, a product of the way he had been brought up. And so in recent years, I guess I just joined a group called the East Side, it's an East Side Support Group, which is a part of the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. I joined that primarily because I had a great deal of confusion, and I had gotten a second opinion about my son. He's been hospitalized over the last, since 1981, 6 times. And I felt that it was important that he have, you know, a very good diagnosis and make sure that the diagnosis that he got in the first time was correct. And so I had him go to the University of Michigan Hospital, and he was diagnosed, and indeed he had schizophrenia and paranoia. And there was a social worker there who said, I really think that it's important for you, Carol, to find out more about the illness and to find out about schizophrenia and what it means. And that's what led me to the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And since that time, I have read a great deal. I don't retain a great deal of knowledge.
Let's talk about that, Dr. Sullivan.
And I've benefited by it. And it doesn't help the hurt that parents feel for their adult children or their young children. I don't think that there's anything that can take place, you know, in that kind of a hurt. But I think that the important thing is to go ahead with research and to inform, you know, my neighbors and whoever I come in contact with that this kind of condition exists and that probably is a biological hereditary factor, and to open up doors and say, talk about it. It's not much different than having, I mean, it's a great deal different than having a heart attack. It's a great deal different than having cancer. It is a crippling disease. It doesn't allow the person to get on with their lives.
No, it's almost as though they're in prison in their mind.
And this was one of when my son was doing some artwork, he was doing some cartooning, and basically the family couldn't understand his cartoons, and we thought, you know,